Imagine a moment when you felt truly, profoundly seen. It usually begins like a dream. You encounter someone who seems to radiate an irresistible gravity, whether it is a charismatic new colleague, a dazzling romantic interest, or a friend who immediately feels like a kindred spirit. The experience is intoxicating. They look at you as if you are the only person in the room, perhaps the only person in the world who truly matters. They listen to your stories with rapt attention, they reflect your deepest values, and they shower you with a level of praise and validation that you have likely spent a lifetime quietly waiting for. In those early days, the world feels vibrant and full of promise. You let your guard down. You open the gates to your mind and your heart, believing you have finally found a safe harbor, a genuine connection that defies the ordinary struggles of human relationships. This is the architecture of the illusion. What you are experiencing is not a sudden, serendipitous alignment of two souls, but a highly calculated performance. You have walked into a hall of mirrors designed by an architect who studies human vulnerability with predatory precision. In this initial phase, you are overwhelmed by an avalanche of affection and attention. Every insecurity you harbor is met with reassurance. Every silent hope you hold is echoed back to you as a shared dream. They morph their personality to become the exact missing puzzle piece you have been searching for. This intense, overwhelming deluge of positive reinforcement is a mechanism of capture. It is a psychological snare designed to bypass your rational defenses and create a deep, unshakable emotional dependency. You are not falling in love or forging a profound friendship. You are being carefully and deliberately groomed. But illusions, by their very nature, require an immense amount of energy to sustain. Eventually, the performance must crack. The mask begins to slip, often so subtly at first that you convince yourself you imagined it. A cold, blank stare in a moment where you expected empathy, a harsh, unwarranted criticism disguised as a joke, a sudden, inexplicable silence that leaves you desperate for their approval. The person who once placed you on a pedestal now looks down at you from it. This shift marks the beginning of a profound psychological disorientation. You start to walk on eggshells, constantly monitoring your words and actions, terrified of triggering the sudden withdrawal of their affection. You find yourself working tirelessly to recreate the magic of those early days, pouring your energy into a black hole, hoping to catch a glimpse of the wonderful person you thought you knew. What you do not yet realize is that the wonderful person never existed. That persona was merely the bait, and now you are caught in a dynamic that operates on an entirely different set of rules. For this type of personality, human interaction is not about connection, it is entirely transactional. They do not view you as an independent human being with your own needs, boundaries, and intrinsic worth. Instead, they view you as a resource. You are an emotional battery, a source of fuel required to sustain their own fragile, inflated sense of self-importance. As long as you are providing endless admiration, agreeing with their flawless perception of themselves, and sacrificing your own needs to cater to theirs, you are useful. The moment you assert your individuality, request reciprocity, or fail to reflect their grandiosity, you become a threat that must be neutralized or a broken toy to be discarded. The toll this takes on your psyche is devastating. You begin to experience a heavy, invisible exhaustion that sleep cannot cure. It is the deep fatigue of a soul that is being systematically drained. You spend your nights ruminating, analyzing every conversation, and questioning your own sanity. They twist the fabric of your shared reality so seamlessly that you begin to second-guess your own memories and perceptions. If they hurt you, they will calmly explain how you provoked them. If they lie, they will convince you that you simply misunderstood. This constant psychological erosion leaves you feeling hollowed out, isolated from the people who truly care about you, and entirely dependent on the very person who is dismantling your sense of self. The tragedy is that your empathy, your conscientiousness, and your desire to see the good in others are the exact traits they exploited to keep you trapped. You might find yourself making endless excuses for their behavior, telling yourself that they are just stressed or misunderstood or carrying pain from their past that only your unwavering love can heal. Because you possess a genuine conscience, you project that same conscience onto them. When you see them act with cruelty or indifference, you assume there must be a rational, human explanation, a misunderstanding that can be resolved with better communication. But communication requires two people willing to hear the truth. You are attempting a dialogue with a mirage. They are not interested in resolution. They are interested in dominance. They want the endless cycle of drama, the apologies you offer for mistakes you never made, and the frantic efforts you make to restore peace. Every tear you shed and every anxious plea for clarity is simply data to them, proof that they have power over your emotional state. This is the dark currency they trade in, and they will bankrupt your spirit to keep their own accounts full. Awakening from this nightmare is one of the most painful, yet profoundly necessary experiences a human being can endure. It requires you to look at the wreckage of the relationship and accept a terrifying truth. There are individuals in this world who simply do not possess the emotional hardware for empathy and mutual respect. They exist behind a mask of charm, driven by an insatiable hunger for control and validation. Understanding this is not an invitation to despair, but the vital first step toward true psychological freedom. Recognizing the machinery of the illusion is the only way to dismantle it. It is the beginning of a journey that will test the very limits of your resilience, forcing you to stop projecting your own conscience onto a person who has none, and demanding that you reclaim the sovereignty of your own mind. Reclaiming the sovereignty of your mind begins with understanding the specific weapons used against it. The most insidious of these tactics is the deliberate distortion of your reality, a psychological erosion that leaves you questioning your own memory and sanity. When you confront a manipulator with a truth, they do not simply deny it, they rewrite history. They look you directly in the eye with chilling conviction and tell you that a conversation never happened or that you are remembering it entirely wrong. They feign confusion or injured innocence so masterfully that you find yourself apologizing for making an accusation. This is not a mere difference of opinion, it is a calculated campaign to systematically dismantle your trust in your own perceptions. By making you dependent on them to define what is real, they gain absolute control over your emotional landscape. You must realize that your greatest virtues are the very levers they pull to keep you off balance. If you are a conscientious person, you naturally look inward when things go wrong, asking yourself how you might have contributed to the conflict and readily accepting your share of the blame. The manipulative personality knows this and exploits it ruthlessly. When you bring up their harmful behavior, they seamlessly shift the focus to your flaws, your tone of voice, or your past mistakes, projecting their own malice onto you. Because you possess a healthy sense of guilt, you take the bait, analyzing your own actions and agonizing over whether you were indeed too harsh or too demanding. While you are busy wrestling with your conscience, they walk away completely unaccountable, having successfully evaded responsibility once again. They are equally adept at playing the victim to secure their position of dominance. When you finally muster the courage to set a boundary or demand respect, they expertly flip the script. Suddenly, they are the ones who are profoundly wounded, misunderstood, or suffering, using this manufactured vulnerability to elicit your pity and compassion. They know that your sensitive nature cannot bear to see someone in pain, and they use this knowledge as the ultimate trap. You find yourself comforting the very person who just mistreated you, abandoning your own legitimate grievances to soothe their fabricated distress. It is a psychological one-two punch that leaves you entirely depleted, serving their needs while your own spirit slowly starves. This constant shifting of blame and reality is what creates that profound, bone-deep exhaustion you feel. You are spending massive amounts of psychological energy trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces are constantly changing shape. You keep trying to communicate better, hoping that if you just find the right words, they will finally understand how much they are hurting you. But you are operating under the false assumption that they share your desire for harmony and mutual respect. They do not. They are not interested in peace. They are interested in power and winning at all costs. The chaos, the arguments, the tears, and the frantic attempts to repair the relationship are all sources of fuel for them. Your emotional turmoil is absolute proof of their significance and control. They feed on your desperation, absorbing the energy you lose in your frantic efforts to stabilize the connection. To survive this, you must construct an impenetrable sanctuary that the ancient philosophers understood as the ruling center of your being, a fortress within your own mind. You have to realize that you cannot control their behavior, their lies, or the false image they project to the world, but you absolutely control your own reasoned choice and the judgments you attach to their actions. When they hurl an insult or spin a lie, it is only a vibration in the air. It only becomes a wound if you grant it permission to enter your mind and agree with it. You must train yourself to observe their provocations with clinical detachment. When they attempt to incite fear or guilt, you step back and look at the behavior objectively. You strip away the emotional adjectives and see it simply as a tactic being deployed by a deeply flawed individual trying to gain an advantage. This cognitive distancing is the beginning of true resilience. It feels unnatural at first because your instinct is to defend yourself, to argue the facts, and to beg them to see reason. But arguing with an illusion only validates it. When you refuse to engage in the drama, when you stop trying to convince them of your worth and simply observe them without emotional reaction, the dynamic fundamentally shifts. You starve them of the reaction they desperately crave. You stop being a source of supply and become an unyielding wall. This requires you to grieve the relationship you thought you had, abandoning the hope that they will miraculously wake up one day and become the empathetic partner or friend you desire. It requires you to accept the brutal truth of their nature without making excuses for them. Stepping out of the fog of manipulation means trusting your intuition again. You must remember that before this person dismantled your confidence, you knew how to interpret the world. You knew what respect felt like. Bore. You knew the difference between a sincere apology and an empty string of words designed to pacify you. Your body remembers this truth even when your mind is clouded. Pay attention to that visceral, physical sensation of anxiety or exhaustion that arises when you are around them. That feeling is your ancient biological warning system telling you that you are in the presence of a predator, regardless of how charming their smile might be. Listening to that inner voice is the first act of profound rebellion against their control. The realization that you cannot trust the manipulator's words, but must instead rely entirely on your own intuition is a profound awakening. However, recognizing the illusion is only half the battle. To truly reclaim your reality, you must fundamentally change the way you interact with this person, and this requires breaking some of your deepest, most ingrained human habits. The hardest habit to break is the desperate urge to explain yourself. When a narcissistic personality accuses you of something absurd or twists a situation to make you look like the villain, your immediate instinct is to clarify. You want to lay out the facts. You believe, because you possess a conscience, that if you can simply find the right words, they will finally understand your perspective and realize they have made a mistake. But you must understand that they are not misinterpreting you. They are deliberately misrepresenting you. When you endlessly defend and justify your actions, you are giving them exactly what they want. You are giving them emotional data. You are proving that their words have the power to destabilize you. Every tear you shed, every frantic message you send trying to clear your name is absorbed as absolute proof of their dominance. To disarm them, you must adopt a strategy of radical non-engagement. In the face of their manufactured chaos, you must become utterly uninteresting. When they attempt to provoke a reaction, you offer nothing but neutral, factual acknowledgement. If they insult you or falsely accuse you, you do not argue. You simply state that you see things differently and you disengage. You refuse to enter the courtroom where they act as both judge and jury. By starving them of the emotional drama they crave, you become a device they can no longer operate. This requires the construction of what ancient philosophers considered an inner, impenetrable fortress. You must accept that you have absolutely no control over what this person says, does, or thinks, but you retain absolute control over your own assent to their behavior. When they hurl an insult, it is merely a vibration in the air. It only becomes a psychological wound if you grant it permission to enter your mind and agree with it. You must train yourself to look at their provocations with clinical detachment. Imagine viewing them not as a powerful adversary, but as a tragic, deeply flawed individual acting out of a profound ignorance of what it means to be a decent human being. You do not get angry at a hurricane for blowing down a tree, and you do not try to reason with a scorpion. You simply recognize their nature and take the necessary steps to protect yourself. A crucial part of building this defense is learning to judge them solely by their actions, entirely disregarding their intentions, their excuses, or their supposed potential. Conscientious people often fall into the trap of playing amateur psychologist. We try to mind read. We look at the narcissist's cruel behavior and try to trace it back to their difficult childhood, their insecurities, or their hidden pain. We tell ourselves that they do not truly mean to hurt us, that underneath the hostility is a wounded soul crying out for love. But this is a dangerous delusion that keeps you tethered to an abuser. Their underlying intentions are completely irrelevant to the reality of the harm they are causing you. If a person consistently lies, manipulates, and drains you, that behavior is the only truth you need to act upon. You must stop waiting for the wonderful person they pretended to be in the beginning to suddenly return. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, and you must make your decisions based on the reality of the present moment, not the fantasy of a potential future. Furthermore, you must surrender the desperate desire for closure. The narcissistic personality will rarely, if ever, offer you a genuine apology. They will not validate your pain, nor will they suddenly acknowledge the immense damage they have done to your life. In fact, when you finally draw a line in the sand, they will likely launch a campaign to rewrite history, portraying themselves as the ultimate victim and casting you as the aggressor. They will tell this fabricated story to anyone who will listen. Your ego will scream out for vindication, demanding that the record be set straight. But fighting this battle is a trap. If you spend your days agonizing over the lies they are telling others, you are still allowing them to dictate your emotional state. You are still dancing to their music. True closure does not come from them, it comes from you. It comes from the quiet, powerful decision to walk away from a game you were never meant to win. Think of the massive amounts of psychic energy you have expended trying to navigate their moods, anticipate their outbursts, and solve the unsolvable puzzle of their personality. Now, imagine taking all of that frozen, trapped energy and liberating it. Imagine redirecting all of that intense focus back into your own life, your own ambitions, and your own healing. When you stop fighting to change a reality that is completely outside of your control, you experience an enormous surge of power. You realize that you do not need their validation to know your own worth. You do not need their confession to know the truth of what happened. This transition from victim to sovereign individual is the forge of true resilience. It is a painful shedding of naivete, but it replaces that vulnerability with an unbreakable core. You learn that your empathy is a precious resource, a gift that should be given only to those who have demonstrated the character to honor it, rather than exploited by those who view it as a weakness. You begin to trust your own senses again. You begin to value your own peace of mind above the chaotic demands of anyone else. The moment you redirect your energy away from the illusion and back into yourself, a profound transformation begins to unfold. You stop asking why this happened to you and start realizing that this experience, harrowing as it was, has become the exact crucible needed for your awakening. When you are entangled with a manipulative personality, you are living in a reactive state, constantly adjusting your behavior to manage their unpredictable moods. But as you withdraw your participation from their endless games, you experience a massive psychological shift. You are no longer the supporting character in their fabricated drama. You have stepped out of the theater entirely and walked into the sunlight of your own life. Think of the immense reservoir of psychic energy you previously surrendered to this person. You spent countless hours ruminating on their words, agonizing over your perceived failures, and desperately trying to fix a relationship that was designed to be broken. That mental loop acted as a leak in your vitality, draining your ambition, your joy, and your peace. Now, imagine taking all of that trapped, frozen energy and liberating it. When you make the conscious choice to stop fighting a battle you were never meant to win, that energy returns to you. By refusing to engage, by unmemorizing the feelings of anxiety and inadequacy they installed in you, you literally rewire your own mind. You reclaim the fuel that was being siphoned away from your future. This reclaimed energy becomes the foundation for a new, unbreakable version of yourself, ready to be poured into your own growth, your own passions, and your own genuine success. This journey of reclaiming your reality forces you to confront the world with a new, armored wisdom. You learn that while you cannot control the chaos of the world or the cruelty of certain individuals, you possess absolute, sovereign power over your own responses. You were thrust into a storm of psychological manipulation, but instead of being shattered by the wind, you learned how to build a shelter. You constructed an inner fortress, a sanctuary of perspective where your self-worth is no longer determined by the fickle, transactional applause of a manipulator. You understand now that their inability to love, their inability to see you as a human being with intrinsic value, is their profound tragedy, not your personal flaw. They are condemned to wander through life interacting with mirrors, forever isolated in their own grandiosity, while you retain the beautiful, uniquely human capacity for authentic connection. There is an ancient, profound concept that suggests we do not just survive our hardships, we can actually become stronger at the broken places. When a valuable piece of pottery shatters, a master craftsman does not throw it away or try to hide the cracks with invisible glue. Instead, they repair the breaks with gold, making the repaired object even more beautiful and resilient than it was before the fall. The scars left by your encounter with a manipulator are not marks of shame or permanent damage. They are the golden seams of your character. You now possess a depth of empathy, a sharpness of intuition, and a fierce, unapologetic protective instinct that you simply did not have before. You can spot a wolf in sheep's clothing from a mile away. Your boundaries, once porous and easily compromised by a charming smile, are now fortified walls. You have learned the difference between genuine kindness and calculated seduction, and because of this, you are infinitely safer in the world. To achieve ultimate freedom, there is one final silent victory you must claim, the victory of indifference. You do not need to seek revenge, nor do you need to expose their true face to the world. A manipulator is already trapped in a prison of their own making, terrified of being unmasked, endlessly exhausting themselves to maintain their fragile illusions. Attempting to destroy them only keeps you tethered to their gravity. True closure does not come from their apology or their confession. It comes from your absolute realization that they simply do not matter anymore. You release the burden of resentment because holding on to it is like drinking toxins and expecting the other person to suffer. You forgive the situation, not because their behavior was acceptable, but because you absolutely refuse to carry their darkness into your bright future. As you step fully into this new reality, you will notice a profound lightness in your spirit. The exhaustion fades, replaced by a calm, steady power. You no longer walk on eggshells. You walk with the grounded certainty of someone who knows exactly who they are. You have faced the absolute worst of human deception and emerged with your soul intact. You have learned that your empathy is a precious gift, a treasure to be shared only with those who have demonstrated the integrity to honor it, never to be exploited by those who view it as a weakness. You are no longer a victim of a toxic illusion. You are the architect of your own truth. You have taken back the pen, and the story you write from this moment forward belongs entirely to you. You are free to build great things, to love deeply, and to live with radical authenticity, completely untethered from the shadows of the past. The door to their hall of mirrors is locked behind you. The vast, limitless horizon of your actual life is waiting. Walk forward, and do not ever look back.